So let's take a look back, or let's assess where we are in this dialogue. I mean, we're at the most dramatic point, and the drama is emphasized by Phaedo, who we've almost forgotten of. He's actually the person narrating this, telling this dialogue to this other guy. Kecrates actually stops the narration and says, they actually speak a little bit. And it is this moment of great drama and in the dialogue where he talks about a little interaction he has with Socrates, or he had with Socrates. And it reminds us that this is not just a theoretical discussion. It's a discussion taking place on the day that Socrates knows he will die. I mean, every moment of this dialogue as it moves towards its conclusion is also a moment closer to Socrates' execution at the end of the dialogue when he drinks the hemlock. But why is it such a dramatic moment? It's a dramatic moment because these two objections to the very idea of the immortality of the soul, these two objections to the very idea of life after death, have been offered by these two guys, Simmias and Cebes. And I have emphasized the one over the other, although I think Plato thinks that the other one is more important. But two objections. First, from Simmias, saying, I think it amounts to something like that. The soul is a kind of harmony produced by the living body. So when the body goes, the soul does too. The second one from Cebes, generally speaking, is the idea basically saying, well, even if the soul is something that's more durable than the body, being something immaterial, what evidence do we have that it doesn't eventually wear out too, just like the body does? So if we're looking for why it is such a dramatic moment, it's a dramatic moment because Socrates and everybody there actually takes these objections very seriously. And Socrates, in his proofs that he's offered for the immortality of the soul, has been pretty credible. I mean, pretty convincing. And then when these two men, Simmias and Cebes, offer their objections, the air seems to go out of the room. Like, oh yeah, well, these are good objections. We thought that Socrates had the best argument, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't. And so, of course, the possible failure of Socrates' argument for the immortality of the soul is very very close. I mean, it's a very intimate thing. It's a very meaningful personal failure because Socrates is, as everyone knows, about to die. So if his argument for the immortality of the soul turns out to be a failure, then that's a big deal. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we get into now, and it becomes a very sort of complex thing. But I just like to point out that the first thing that Socrates says to Phaedo is we should not become misologists. And that's a result of what I just said. Mythology is literally, it's a kind of a, a made up word, but it basically means hatred, hatred of argument, hatred of reason. And since philosophy basically is made up of arguments and is a rational inquiry into truth, to give up argument would be to give up philosophy. And he's brought this up because he realizes, well, he himself has given his arguments for the immortality of the soul, and everyone was convinced by them. And then Simmias and Sieve gave their arguments against the immortality of the soul, and everyone's now convinced by those. So it just seems like it might be a kind of a pointless enterprise to argue about such things, because we seem to be swayed by the last argument we hear, and that kind of points us in the direction of concluding that argument about such things is useless, is a waste of time. And I think there are many people who would agree with that. Because after all, what we're talking about is something which is metaphysical. And all I mean by that is we're inquiring into a question that we can't answer by ordinary means. And by ordinary means, um, if somebody asks you the question, what color is that tree? Well, you look at the tree to see what color it is. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. Okay, I had to do a little sneeze there. You look at the tree, you see what color it is. It's green. You know, uh, how many people live in the USA? Well, let's go count them. May not be so easy, but there's an answer. Compare those questions with, well, I mean, how do you even begin to answer a question like that? I mean, like it's like typical physical questions like this: does God exist? Well, I mean, you can't go look. I mean, how many people live in the United States? Well, look around, count them, and you'll find out. Does God exist? Well, what would it even mean to look for God? Right? I mean, so the question of the immortality of the soul is one that we can only approach indirectly through argument. We can never have like a direct experience of these things. So the first thing that Socrates wants to convince people of is that it's worthwhile to do the kind of things that they're doing, which is to engage in an inquiry into a metaphysical question like, is the soul immortal? Is there a life after death? Because we would have maybe some pretty good reasons for saying it's not, because you can never really decide it. So what's the point of even trying to find the truth if you can never be sure? Socrates hates that idea. I mean, because Socrates loves philosophy, and so the first thing that he wants to say is, what we're doing is worthwhile, even if it's very challenging. Looking for truth through argumentation like this, through discussion, is something that is important to do.